What is going on, guys? This is CJ here, and I am with Troy Jeffrey Allen. How's it going, sir?
What's up, everybody? How's it going?
Yeah. So I've known Troy for a very long time. We're
Yeah.
gonna say early 3BG when we had just started out. I think we befriended him and
hmm
a lot of other people on Twitter at the time. And
hmm
I believe where were you working at the time? Were you
I was working at Alliance Comics. Well, yeah, I want to say that I was working at Alliance Comics and Games, or at least I was part time at that point.
Yeah.
And I was in downtown Silver Spring, and yeah, I just got really used to just turning the convention scene and the comic shops into like my social network at that point. Like it was just like, yeah, I was like, I'm gonna go make some friends at these cons and see who I meet and see what we can talk about. So I was all for it.
Yeah. And I
hmm
remember Troy was like big in the comics game. I think you were
hmm
doing Action Go Go at the time.
Okay, yeah, so that might have been like like 2012,
Yeah,
2013,
yeah,
something like that.
2012,
Yeah.
somewhere around there and stuff,
Yeah.
still early Twitter and such.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
Troy has been on two of our panels. Our very first panel at MagFest, and we actually did a panel with them at Action at Go at AwesomeCon,
At Awesome Con.
early AwesomeCon. That was like second year, third
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. 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 But it was still jumping then. I remember that too. Like it was still kind of a big show, even regardless.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah,
I
I
didn't
remember.
realize that was your first. I didn't realize that was your first episode.
Yeah, that was our that was like that was like our very first.
Oh
Like the
wow.
MagFest thing was like our very first like
Wow.
con and actually getting something happening. So that we were still green in the game,
Oh crap. Okay.
podcasting game. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I remember I saw you some years back. I would say pre-pandemic. You were pushing one of your comics,
Mm-hmm.
Fight of the Century.
Yes.
I got a
Yes.
picture
Yes.
of it here.
Yeah.
And was this the very first comic that you actually started, or did you do something prior to this?
No, so here's my deal, right? Like I'm very much a person who I want to know if I like something, I want to know why I like it
Mhm,
and how it's made and like the people behind it. Like that's kind of my default.
mhm.
And so my attitude was pretty simple, which is like, okay, well let me just kind of cut my teeth on making comics and try to figure out how they work. Like, just figure out the insides of it.
Yeah.
And so I did a book called Bam, which was the first comic I did, which was about a pro wrestler who trains a bunch of high school kids to fight the bullies at their school.
Yeah.
I did that with Jay Payne, and that was just kind of like a. I think we were kind of going for like an Adult Swim vibe with that.
Yeah.
So just kind of like the animated naughty cartoon type of thing.
Mhm.
And then between that, I did a bunch of like just short stories for like DC Conspiracy. I did stuff for the Magic Bullet. I did some like soft sci-fi stuff, some stuff for space. I just kind of kept playing around with the format to try to figure out what it is that I like. And then eventually, hanging around at cons, I met Nick Allen, who no relation, but
Yeah.
Nick Allen, like, and I started tabling, and he was just like, "I got this MMA comic I want to do," and I was, and at that point, I was very much open to like, "Let's do it. I don't care what it is. Let's just make it. I want to write it. Let me write
Yeah.
it."
Yeah.
So that was kind of my general attitude at the time. So yeah, we just kind of started to piece it together, like what this was,
Mhm.
and we took it to Kickstarter, made about
Yeah.
about
Then y'all reach our goal.
yeah, we reached our goal. We made about 7K
Yeah.
on the book. Um, and we got number one out on time. Number two and number three were a little slow going, right?
Mhm.
But it just so happens that now we're at a point where we're about to get picked up by Second Sight Publishing, so we'll be in comic shops soon.
Oh wow.
And so that's where we are now. We've actually gone and remastered the first issue,
Mhm.
and yeah, we're going to be releasing 2 and 3 and 4, and it's going to be basically branching out into an 8-part series. So it's going to be more world building, more a lot of everything else too.
So what were kind of the big lessons, before we go into the book proper, what was some of
Mhm.
like the lessons you kind of picked up on over the years from doing BAM up until this point that you kind of did that kind of helped you do Fight of the Century?
Well, you know what? As this is, and I hate to admit this, but this is a lesson that I kind of am learning in the last 2 or 3 years. I want to say is, I kind of came up with a lot of the very cinematic writers like the Brian Michael Bendis and Brian K. Vaughan, Warren Ellis, Mark Miller, especially. They really did like a very kind of like they had a very film style of storytelling, right? And there
Mhm.
was that whole like genre of widescreen paneling that was kind of a thing with like the Ultimates and
Yeah.
Nemesis. A lot of Mark Miller stuff actually did that. And so I kind of, even though I've been reading comics for years prior to that, I really kind of drilled down into, okay, so this is how I can tell a comic because I have a film background. Like, you know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
was like, okay, I understand this language. I'll do it this way. And I was kind of doing this kind of more cinematic thing for like the last couple of years. And then I think somewhere, actually, no, and I'll say actually somewhere around Frontiersman, which was a comic I did with artist Matt Rawson
Mhm.
back in 2014, 2015. I started to realize, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of bored with the 3 act structure. I'm kind of bored with just the basic plot mechanics of Hollywood storytelling. I just kind of
Mhm.
got bored with that stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the big lesson to me. It was just like, okay, Troy, why don't you open yourself up to looking at the medium of comics and just telling it in a format that is approachable for the artist,
Mhm.
visually approachable for the reader, and just kind of like take it back a little bit. You know what I mean? Take it back
Yeah.
to the stuff that you, truthfully, the stuff that I read in the 90s and the stuff that I read in the 80s, and like try to find a bridge between the stories I want to tell and just telling something that's very much for the format, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's interesting just because I even see a lot of writers now not do that. They're still kind of doing stories cinematically,
Mhm.
um, largely to tell a story so that it can probably get adapted into a movie, right?
Yeah,
You know,
that is the big thing now.
yeah. And so my whole thing is like, no, I kind of want to just kind of play with the page. Like, you know what? I don't want to think about I'll put it like this: like, movies are the story unraveling scene to scene,
Mhm.
and comics are very specifically the story unraveling from page to page,
Yeah.
right? And that's how you pace out a story. And that was the thing that I had to kind of like get used to and get comfortable with and then
Mhm.
start doing. So I just kind of had to shred the Hollywood mentality that I got from film school and from doing short films and just watching a lot of movies like in general, and just started like kind of going like, yeah, let's just build the page and try to tell the story that way. So
Yes.
that's where I am now. And that was a huge lesson. Like, that was a huge lesson.
Yeah. So I mean, with you and Nick collaborating on this, like, how did y'all go about the initial brainstorming process? Because you obviously said Nick had the idea of wanting to
Mhm.
do it MMA thing. So how did you kind of help him kind of get it formulating to what you have currently at this
Um,
point?
it's kind of one of those things where it's like kind of time, space, and place, right? Like um, it was like around the time that we started conceptualizing this around the time of all the, I don't know if you remember all the don't eat meat documentaries that were kind
Hmm.
of like coming out like about maybe 6 years ago. So
Yeah.
we started kind of formulating it around that time. And so there was a big focus on Monsanto, like, corporations like that, and like genetically engineered crops,
Yeah.
and like, why you should only eat grass-fed food and all this other stuff. And I bring that up because Nick's whole concept was, what if we took fighters and legalized performance enhancing drugs and let them just fight it out in the ring?
Yeah.
And so, looking at that concept, I started to kind of go, well, okay, this is definitely a sci-fi story, so this is like a little bit further into the future, right?
Yeah.
So what other things can we do to build this world out, you know?
Yeah.
And in doing so, like, I kind of started to, this these food documentaries and all these pushes for grass-fed beef and et cetera, like kind of started to filter into the story itself.
Hmm.
And so I started to kind of realize, like, okay, so this idea of genetically modifying things is not just or just like this idea of superfoods, you know,
Yeah.
is is a concept that is kind of very popular right now with people. And I kind of could see how it could bleed into, when you're looking at big pharma, how it could bleed into the world of sports. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
And that kind of like really was a big situation. That was a situation where like it really kind of opened the story up, and I was like, okay. And then on top of that, I was like, I want to do cyberpunk. Nick and I were both kind of in the mindset that we both want to do something very 80s, something very Rocky Four,
Yeah.
but also pulling from a bunch of different things too. Because I mean, of course, Rocky Four kind of deals with PEDs, right? Too, as
Yeah. In a
well.
little way, we just did an episode on Rocky Four. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
know you did. I saw that. I caught that actually.
Yeah.
Um, and so like, so there was those elements. And so you're just kind of looking at how you just start to go from this one idea to this larger idea of how the medical world handles making things improving things unnaturally, right? Whether
Yeah.
it be foods or humans or whatever it is, from
Mm.
and so then it became a whole conversation about like, well, this could be about Ritalin. This could be about genetically modified foods. This could be about steroids and baseball. This could be in like, you just kind of start to see all the threads get pulled in at once. And Nick and I have started to joke that like every year that goes by that we keep working on this book, we realize we're like, this isn't science fiction. Like this is science fact at this
Yeah, real
point.
fast.
Like, and I mean, it's all shit that we made up. Like, you know what I mean? Like I mean, like a lot of the stuff was stuff that was in a that like we kind of picked up from reading about different things with GMOs and all this other stuff. But a lot of it was just sort of like, well, wouldn't it be crazy if? And then a couple of months later, I'm on IG and someone's doing it. you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, that kind of that was kind of like the process for us, is we just kind of looked around for different inspiration, and Nick and I we just kind of bounced back and forth ideas, and by the time we were finished, we kind of had this weird little story, this weird big story about an MMA fighter who's also a farmer. And so that's
Mm.
kind of how like all those ideas kind of came together, and then we kind of like said, okay, well, let's get into the big pharma aspect. Like, what is the Monsanto version of what is our version of Monsanto in our story? And so we came
Mm.
up with Braun Farm, this big biotech organization and stuff like that. So it's been fun. It's been fun to kind of watch some of the stuff uh not become fiction in a weird way.
Yeah, because it kind of gave me I don't know if you ever watched the anime Megalobox.
Yeah, you know what? You are the second person to tell me that. And so I don't know when Megalobox came out, but we were working on this in 2016
I think
and
Megalobox came out 2018.
2018. Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
we were working on this in 2016, and then I think when I was at BlurredCon one year, someone mentioned Megalobox to me because I guess it had just dropped on Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that was actually kind of like, oh, okay, well,
That's
I
dope.
yeah, it was kind of. I mean, it was one of those things. I always have these moments where I'm like, shit, it's too close to what we're doing. Then I'm like, well, maybe we're tapping into something, and someone else is doing something very similar, right?
Yeah.
And so then actually looking into Megalobox, I was like, well, actually, they're doing something very different than what we're doing. So
Yeah.
whatever.
The
And I mean,
the
I
vibe.
also already told you, like, it is. There's elements of Rocky Four in here. There's elements of the stuff that happens to Kaneda and Akira.
Yeah.
Like there's elements of Fist of the North Star. There's a lot of Jackie Chan stuff because Jackie Chan's my absolute favorite.
Mhm.
Everything. So I mean, like, it just comes from all different directions.
Yeah, so I mean, you're doing this whole world as you explained, and you're doing these characters.
Mhm.
Was there ever a point that you had to stop yourself from really like going like too over the top? Or was it just like, no, we can still kind of go crazy over the top and still kind of keep our vision in a way?
Well, so the funny thing is, like, while I was working on Fight of the Century, um, I was already kind of transitioning out of the doing the movie style of storytelling.
Mhm.
So the first issue is I feel is kind of like a movie, in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. It's paced out like the opening scene of a movie. And as we were going along, I started to shed that more and more. And so now we're talking about what the second half of this book is going to look like.
Mhm.
And now I'm just sort of like, let's just go crazy. Like we're dealing with steroids and genetically enhanced people and biotech organizations. Can we get into some body horror stuff?
Mhm.
Can we get into some low key like David Cronenberg Fly type stuff? Can we do
Yeah.
some like, you know what I mean? Like, can we do just like, what is technology? What about the technology and genetic world? Like, how does that factor in here? Like,
Mhm.
are there transhumans, like people who want to meld with machine more and more? And then, I mean, even speaking of trans, like, I mean, there's even stuff that like, in terms of like hormone therapy that kind of works its way into the story. So we're just kind of looking at everything and just seeing how crazy we can get with it at this point.
Do you think like I mean, this obviously being kind of like an indie comic and stuff, what is kind of like the big hurdle that a lot of indie comics pretty much have to go through that's not part of Image and Marvel, DC, and some of these other like big companies in terms of kind of getting that exposure, especially for a book like this? Because
Right.
I know this is kind of like, I'm not gonna say it's a tough sell, but it's kind of like one of those when you put out an indie comic, you're kind of like big fish, small fish in a
Small
big
pond.
pond.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and the thing. So, what has been kind of like the hurdle for you to
I
kind of
mean,
get this book pushed?
I'm always cool with being a small fish. I mean, the big fish in the small pond, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I just it kind of helps me zero in on the audience. So I guess that would be the number one thing I would say is maybe the hurdle is sometimes people make stuff and they don't know who the audience is.
Mhm.
And that's been a serious conversation with Nick and I for ever since we started doing this. Is like, well, who's our audience? It's like, well, it's an MMA comic, so let's go court the martial arts crowd. And I think that that's been one of those things where, like, of course, we go to BlurredCon or SPX, you never quite know who's going to be there,
Mhm.
but consistently, typically, I always ask people, like, are you into martial arts or are you into MMA? And the people that come to our table already are like, yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, that's our avenue. And so because of that, we started going to Urban Action Expo and Showcase, which is like largely a martial arts show, like, like Michael Jai White's there, like celebrating his birthday every year, and like they're doing screenings
Yeah.
of old Shaw Brothers movies, and like characters from the Warrior, like actors from the Warriors are there, like so we kind of figured out early on, like, okay, this is an '80s vibe. Right, even though it takes
Mhm.
place in the future, we're going to go for an '80s vibe, and it's a martial arts story. So let's kind of zero in into the Jean Claude Van Damme kickboxer, Rocky
Yeah.
Four, Cynthia Rothrock. Let's
Yeah.
zero it into that crowd. Like, let's find that common ground with them and say, like, this is for you. And yeah, and I think that's a difficult thing for people. Some people don't care about that, which is cool. I wish I was one of those people, but I'm not. But I'm
Yeah.
not. I always am like, well, who am I writing this for? That's always the first thing I think of. I wish I was one of those artists who was like, I don't care what it is, either you're with it or you're not. But I can't do that.
So, I mean, looking at this art style for the book, I mean,
Mhm.
how did y'all manage to court? I mean, because who does the art style for this book?
So this is artist Julius Abrera. Julius is definitely an MMA fan, which is one of the
Mhm.
main reasons we pulled him in. But he's also just got a very clean, almost traditional art style in a lot
Mhm.
of ways. Like Julius is more in line with people like Phil Jimenez and people that just do like just solid line work and solid character work. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so that was the number one thing. Now that said, there was a bunch of stuff that kind of got us to this point because we originally were working with an artist named Sean Aileen,
Mhm.
and Sean couldn't do it because he was working on another project, and so we had to kind of shift gears. And so we were looking for somebody who was already into MMA,
Mhm.
B could draw fights, and someone I didn't want to lean. I didn't want to get somebody who could. I'll put it like this: I wanted someone who could, if I said try to make this a little bit more anime, they could.
Mhm.
But I also wanted somebody who had a very like just solid line style, like it just could draw very good characters, do very good character work.
Yeah.
And Julius is definitely one of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, besides having that vision, I mean, was there like ever like I mean, because obviously you're doing a comic like this, you're going through different drafts of like you said, your vision and have an anime look and traditional look. Was there ever any other type of style that you actually wanted to go for that you ended up kind of like changing your mind on?
In terms of art.
Yeah, just in terms of the art, in terms of the visual.
No, I mean Julius is very diverse, and that's kind of like the cool thing about him is when we did the version that's coming out into comic shops is not
Mhm.
necessarily the exact same version that came out to Kickstarter a few years back,
Okay.
and so the idea here is that like we're doing sort of like the special edition of number one, and
Yeah.
that comes from us talking to people at cons,
Mhm.
talking to our peers, like and people who like just other writers and other creators, getting feedback from them
Mhm.
and them saying like, well, you need more of this, you probably need more of that, you probably need more of this, and just finding room to actually make that fit in the story that we're telling.
Okay.
And also I just think I've become more aware of the tropes of the martial arts genre more than I was when we first started this.
Yeah.
So I kind of hit a point where I realized all right, we need more montages. like like we
Can't
gotta
get
have the
enough more montages.
right. I just like I had a moment like where I was just like, we were doing we were revising the story, and I was like, you know what? This needs a montage. This needs like a couple of workout routines and like this and that. And then we just made it happen because we just kind of felt that it was very appropriate for the type of story we're telling. And so Julius has been really diverse, man. Like he's really been able to do a range of different things, everything from building like Our story takes place in Brazil in the future. So
Mhm,
he's done, everything from making a futuristic Brazil, a futuristic Rio,
mhm,
that's been destroyed by a flood and like has been taken over by this evil biotech company, to doing like, to me going like to me taking screen grabs from Rumble in the Bronx and saying, no, I want this.
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like he's been doing like just doing a great job with all of it. So I love it. So yeah, there hasn't been any second thought about it at all.
So I mean, is
Now,
this? Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, now that said, because we're switching gears halfway through, because our story is really about two characters,
Mhm,
Rex Punga and DOA. Rex Punga represents the anti um, PED side, the anti-drug side, and DOA Darren Andrade, which is his ring name. It represents like the pro steroids, pro PEDs, pro like
yeah.
drug side, and so we're going to be shifting to telling Darren's story in the next chapter. So we're actually going to get another artist on that.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So, with you actually getting your book in the comic book shops, is there a layer of like nervousness that comes with it, or is it just like,
Yeah,
I mean, I mean, is there
yeah.
like what's the expectations for you guys for this book finally hitting comic shops?
Well, man, I talk so much shit about people's stuff. Like, it's just one of those things where I do this weekly show for Previews World. I work in the comic book industry. I work for a comic book distributor, and of course I do try to be careful not to step on people's toes too much, right?
Mm,
But I'm still an opinionated person, and so our weekly show is me making picks based off of what I think is good, you know.
mhm.
So that understood, you make your own comic, it better be good.
I
Like,
mean, yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the deal, right? Like it'd be one thing if I was just some random person who just was like popping off on the internet just saying like everything's crap, but like I'm out here giving recommendations to people, telling them what quality is, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And some people are foolish enough to listen to me, so I'm like, I kind of have to back it up. And part of that was sending it off to people like you, Chris, and sending it off to writers and like just creative people I knew, and just kind of getting a read on, does this work? Is it pacing good? Does it
yeah.
pull you in? All that stuff. So
I mean, how much I mean, is it getting distributed pretty much nationwide, or is it just like East Coast? Like, what's the distribution for this book
it's
like?
nationwide, and actually because it's going through Diamond, it'll be in some European markets,
Oh,
and
wow,
yeah, and
wow.
some South American markets as well. So yeah, or actually no, and not South America. I think it might be Mexico, but not South America. But we are going to work on getting the book in Brazil because I think the book actually might play pretty well right there over there. Like Brazil kind of has this really passionate comic book audience
Hmm.
that was going underserved for a while, but now if you notice, a lot of the major companies, they're grabbing Brazilian artists and bringing them over here
Yeah,
because they know that there's a base there. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So yeah, I'm interested in exploring that for sure.
I mean, do you see with this distribution? I mean, is there going to be kind of like, all right, we're going to need to actually start venturing out to more conventions to kind of keep spreading the word of this book, or is it just pretty much just staying the course that y'all already doing already?
And, I mean, I want to be, we've tried to break the cycle of just going to conventions just for the sake of going to conventions.
Mhm.
And I think at this point we know what cons play well to us and what cons we just kind of get
Shuffle.
drowned out in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would probably never do San Diego Comic Con. At
Yeah,
least not at this point.
that's
Uh,
rough.
yeah, that said, I actually did really well at New York Comic Con, but I think that also has to do with, there's a very diverse martial arts community there, and it also helped that I was connected to the Urban Action Expo booth. So, it's like
Yeah,
they knew where to find us, and
yeah.
I'm standing right next to freaking Timac from The Last Dragon selling my comic book.
I mean, you've been pushing us to actually go to it, and we're definitely going to try to go this
You
year.
should.
We're
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
going to try to go there
Hmm.
because we tried to go a previous year and something came up, so we didn't go. But I'm
Hmm.
definitely trying to check it out, even if it's for a day.
Hmm.
Just check out the whole thing because it seems like that's a huge untapped audience that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think that and they're really passionate and they just want more of it because, depending on who you are, you might feel like there's not enough. martial arts content out there, you know.
Yeah.
And it's also been just very educational too, because we've gotten to talk with martial artists about, well, why is this and why is that, and understand their philosophy. Like
Mhm.
I talked to this one guy about moving Zen, and this idea that your body is like, being in touch with your body and all this other stuff, and and with the movements of your muscles and all this stuff is really interesting to me. I find this stuff really fascinating, and to find and it's also kind of helped me a little bit just in terms of like my overall workout goals, right? So
Yeah.
we try to implement that in the story as well. So yeah, I definitely love the Urban Action Expo. I think that it's fun, and it's kind of exposes you to new things, and it kind of shows a different side of geek culture and black culture.
Yeah.
That is really interesting, and like I don't think a lot of people are fully aware of. So
Oh, cool. I mean, so is there, past Just Fight the Century, is there any like future books that you want to actually start doing for yourself that
yeah,
you dream of wanting to do?
yeah. I mean, like I've been fortunate despite the pandemic, I actually put out an MF Doom tribute comic right after he had passed, and so
Mhm.
that's actually free online. And then I got to do a Apocalypse '91 with Chuck D. Got to co-write a story with him, which is
Really?
actually pretty cool. Yeah, yeah. So
How was that working with Chuck D?
that
Because I mean,
was.
that's because I think this isn't the first time that Chuck D has actually done something like this. So I have to
Mhm.
imagine, like, I mean, what's that whole process like working with him?
The process for that was kind of really straightforward. It was just sort of like, I want this, I want this, I want this, and I want this.
Oh, okay.
Figure it out. And it's just sort of like, I'm in between junkets or tours or whatever. Like, this is what I want you to do, and it's just sort of like, okay, all right. Like with the Apocalypse, I'll tell you with the Apocalypse '91. His instructions were, the story I want you to do is about a doctor. He's named after some, oh god, I can't remember the name, the culture right now, but he's named after some ancient king. I think it was ancient
Mhm,
Turkish king or something like that.
mhm,
And but it wanted it to be he wanted this story that I was doing to take place in 1991. He
mhm.
wanted the main character to be a doctor, and he wanted me to set up the collection of stories that would come afterwards, because that
Yeah,
was the opening storyline.
yeah.
So yeah, that was just bullet points of what he wanted, and then I just went and tried to figure it out. And I'm happy with what I came up with. So
I mean, so you had those two. I mean, any future ones past this
yeah,
that you
yeah.
got?
Sorry. So
Yeah, my
yeah,
bad.
my bad. So beyond that, I do want to do some more music stuff.
Mhm,
Which is the reason I even brought that up. The MF Doom and the Public Enemy thing. I feel like I need to make it like some sort of trilogy
mhm.
and close it out with something. So I'm trying to figure out what that would be. Maybe a Handsome Boy Modeling School thing, or maybe I would like to do. I kind of would like to do something about Jean Grey, the rapper Jean Grey, maybe, or something like that. I don't know. Um, but outside of that, yeah, I'm trying to get together a project that I think would actually be really cool, and I'm trying to actually target outside of the comic book world, outside of comic shops, to
Mhm.
see if that works. I'm a big fan of anthology books, and so that's kind of what I'm going to be shooting for. But it's going to be very different, and like I don't want to give away too much away on that. But it is going to be different in a lot of ways. Outside of that, the short answer is yeah. I got this. We've started rebranding everything. Create the Culture. We have a logo that's the Create the Culture logo. We've kind of
Mhm.
floating it around with people, and that's just an indication that we're kind of turning a corner with the projects, the type of projects we're going to tell. We're going to try to diversify the portfolio, as people say, and try to do some really wild, crazy shit moving forward. So,
Cool.
mhm,
Lastly, I know you mentioned that you worked at Previews World.
mhm,
How's that been? Because I mean, I have to imagine
yeah.
the pandemic kind of like emboldened y'all to really kind of push some content out. So is Previews
Mhm.
World kind of like have changed their mandate in terms of how they putting out content?
Well, we've actually, and I mean, this was actually kind of self-imposed and also part of a larger conversation we're having. But I've actually scaled back the content,
Oh wow.
because a lot of the stuff that we were doing. I kind of felt like out of habit, like, you know what I mean. And I'm
Mhm,
not sure that it was providing the type of context or information in general that people really wanted.
mhm,
Now that said, there's some things that I want to get back to that we haven't been able to do because of the fact that we haven't been doing conventions like that. Like, we only started
mm,
doing conventions. Actually, I really think San Diego. Well, no, I want to say what Gamma was a couple months ago. So I think we only really started doing conventions with Gamma this year, which is a gaming
okay,
convention.
okay.
And so, yeah, my whole thing is, um, I want to do more sit down interviews with creators.
Mhm.
I got to do some really great ones with John Romita Jr. and Garth Ennis. And so I want to do more of those in-depth career spanning type things. And and then we just started trying to break stuff up into seasons instead of trying to do it year round.
Yeah.
To kind of give ourselves some breathing room, which is kind of like a no-brainer thing, right? I mean, that's why
Yeah.
seasons exist, right?
Yeah.
But we were trying to do some shows like every single month, and it was like breaking me. So,
Yeah.
so it's just sort of like, okay, let's scale this back and try to see what's manageable and see what makes the most sense at this point. So, yeah, it's been more of just kind of being more precise about the type of stuff we put out.
Not cool. Well, I appreciate you joining in on this because I was really
Thanks, man.
like, you know what? For the many years that I've known Troy, I was like, why have I not like at least popped on the show and actually talked about Fight of the Century and just all the stuff that he's done in the comic industry? Because
Thanks,
it's
man.
like Troy is one of many people. I think it's him.
Mhm.
Shout out to Julian. Is it Julian Little?
Idle. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. He like yeah, Lytle. Because I've known him just as long as I've known you, and we've seen
Hmm.
him at every movie screening they
Yeah,
have in this
yeah, yeah,
area and
yeah. That's
stuff. And
Julian's thing. Yeah.
yeah, and I seen them,
Mhm.
some of the DC comic stuff that they had in this area,
Yeah.
that he has at events and stuff. So I'm always
Hmm.
seeing both of y'all two like everywhere.
Hmm.
I'm like, well, let me bring Troy on at least, and just talk
Yeah.
about this, especially
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
BlurCon this past weekend. So,
Right. Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
how's BlurCon for you though this past weekend though?
BlurCon was actually really good. Like I kind of had started to forget how can what conventions work for us and what conventions don't.
Hmm.
And but like BlurCon turned out to be kind of just a really great reception for the book. And
Hmm.
it's not the first time we've done BlurCon. It's just that it's been 3 years since I did it,
Yeah, just
and
yeah,
three
three
years since
years.
I've done any con really.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I want to say the last convention I did was 2020.
Did you go to any last year?
No, no, no.
Mm.
I want to say the last convention I did was New York Comic Con 2020. No,
Oh wow.
2019. I'm sorry.
Oh wow.
So this was the first one I've been back to, and I actually am glad that I decided to make this the one I come back to because, it's a little bit more. Things are definitely looser at BlurCon for sure,
Oh yeah.
but
Definitely.
but also just like it's a community and supportive thing. So like we definitely got a lot of people coming through who are just like, oh hey, I want a patron, I want to be a patron of this. Like I want to support this, and I would tell them like, oh, it's coming out next year. I mean, it's coming out in comic shops in a few months. They're like, I don't care, I want to buy it now.
No.
So it's like, okay, I'll buy it again when it comes out. And I'm like, all right, cool. I appreciate it. I really do. So
I mean,
it
were
was good. It
y'all?
was
I
good.
mean, were y'all shocked that y'all actually made your Kickstarter goal? Because I know that's always like a major thing with comics that have
Yeah.
Kickstarters. Like some of
Hmm.
them make the goal, and then some of them don't. Like, so were y'all shocked that y'all
Yeah.
actually made the goal for it?
Well, I'm actually, I'm kind of like a natural pessimist. I always assume the
Yeah.
worst, so I'm actually surprised when things actually come together. So I always kind of go in with like, not that this won't work, but there's a good chance that this might not succeed. But fuck it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my general attitude. Like, and so I kind of manage my expectations, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But when we crossed the threshold, it was nice to know that people actually were interested in it in the first place, because that's, you think, that you think it's interesting,
Yeah.
right? But there's no, it's not a given that other people will. So
Yeah. That's all right there. But yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about the book and just everything about you. And
cool.
hopefully, I have some links in the video below of where people
Hmm.
can, find the book at. It's
Hmm.
going to be, like I said, Fight of the Century is going to be nationwide. So now that I know that it's nationwide,
Yeah.
'cause I thought it was going to be local. Because when you shared me the link, I was like, is this going to be East Coast only? And then now that you
No.
said it's nationwide, I was like, oh, okay.
Nationwide. So
All
yeah,
right.
if you're in the comic book sphere and you're on YouTube, you'll probably see me a couple more times, letting people know in different states
All
when
right,
it's
cool.
coming out.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And yeah, we will catch you guys later.
All right, thanks, man.
Peace.